I am going to die. And you are going to die. Probably not the most optimistic beginning of a video, but to me it is very important to start this video from this phrase, to set the tone. It's been a long time since I wanted to make this video, especially considering that the game I'm going to talk about today was released 8 years ago. Today I want to talk about Soma and explain to you why this is the most horrifying game I, and probably you, have ever played. Soma is a very unique game in a way. Although frictional games already changed the genre with their Amnesia, in my opinion Soma is a completely new level. Not only does this game have an interesting story, but it was also able to awaken in me a different kind of fear, as opposed to what I was already relatively got accustomed to. In this video I will rely heavily on subjective perception. Yes, all videos in one form or another do it, but in this case, interpretation and reflection are much more interesting than what actually happens in the game in terms of gameplay. If you didn't play this game, I highly recommend you do it. Watch this video only if you played this game and finished it, or if you're definitely not going to play it. Yes, this is a walking simulator, but this is one of the best ones I've ever played. Soma is a very special game, although I realized it sometime later after finishing it. I just couldn't put my thoughts into words properly. Going through the games in my head that could evoke strong emotions in me, even negative ones, I was surprised to find that Soma is one of the brightest examples of such games. Unlike already mentioned Amnesia, Soma gives fear a slightly different shape. And unlike many other horror games that rely mostly on screamers and gore, the fear that the protagonist of the game experiences will be understandable to absolutely everyone. I'll describe the plot shortly so that it is clear what I'm talking about, omitting important but not so necessary details for this video. Simon Jarrett and his girlfriend Ashley got into a car crash in 2015. Unfortunately, Ashley didn't survive and Simon got extremely serious brain damage. Due to the pain and complications, he decides to take part in an experimental treatment. He will allow to take a scan of his brain and hope that a new technology Dr. Munshi invented is going to help Simon get better. After finishing the scan, Simon wakes up in a completely different place.
What happened? Hello? Mr. Munshi?
In the process of research, he realizes that now it's 2104 and he's at a certain underwater station called Pathos 2. Some time ago, a comet fell on Earth, which forced humanity to hide underwater. He will meet robots that ask not to kill them and claim that they are real people. On the way, he will meet Catherine, who will become our companion for the rest of the game.
No, not you too. I was really hoping you were human.
Don't let the circuitry fool you. I was human once.
She, like many other scientists, tried to transfer the consciousness of the remaining people to a certain digital device called the Ark and send it into space. More than that, our character is not the Simon from 2015. That Simon died shortly after the scan. The protagonist is a digital copy of his brain, which was made in 2015, and which came to life in a robotic suit that functions on the basis of a structure gel, a substance that can bind electronics and biological tissues. The Ark project was almost finished. Almost all digital copies of people were transferred there, where they would live safely in a good environment. All we have to do is to launch the Ark into space, where it will be able to drift for thousands of years. At some point, we find out that Simon and Catherine will be able to copy themselves onto the Ark as well, until one moment, which literally made me feel something unpleasant in my abdomen. At a certain moment, Simon will have to descend to a rather significant depth, and to do this, he will need to construct a new body for himself and move his consciousness into it. And it would seem everything is fine. We find all the necessary details and create a body, ready to dive to great depths. And here's a small nuance opens up. It turns out that our consciousness is not transferred, only a digital copy of it is created.
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
It's the same like before.
Catherine, why was he still talking?
That's how it works, you know that.
What do you mean?
You know it's not magic. You were copied. The sleeping Simon in the sea was copied, and now you are here, just like Simon lived on in Toronto.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
What did you think would happen?
That you were gonna take my mind and put it into another body, like a brain transplant.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't work that way.
You realize how messed up this is?
Please, I didn't mean to upset
How did you expect me to react to this shit?
you. Please stop.
You're fucking disgusting. What's gonna happen to him?
He'll sleep for a while, a few days.
And then what? Wake up in this fucking nightmare again? All alone? So cruel.
Well, what do you want me to do with him? Make friends? Let him know that we have to leave him behind when we go into the abyss?
What if he didn't need to wake up?
You'd do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
There. I set it up for you. Hit the switch if you want to drain his battery. He'll die within a minute. I'd rather not stay plugged in any longer.
In other words, we now have 2 Simons, one of whom can continue his journey, and the other one cannot. And we have a choice: leave the first Simon we've been playing up until this moment here all alone, or get rid of him. For those who have realized the principle of the machine for the transfer of consciousness, the ending won't be surprising. Or will it be? But I will speak about the ending a little further. Yes, this game does not give you any choice of reactions. The game is completely linear and doesn't give any consequences for your actions. But you don't know this on your first walkthrough, which allows keeping the tension and illusion of importance. But the sequence of some events is so well thought that you can't help but admire it. For example, at the beginning of the game, we think that we're human. Meeting robots who called themselves people, I was extremely surprised by their behavior. There must be some error, I thought. I mean, this is a machine. It simply cannot be alive. And to advance the plot, I need the energy that they consume. Not a big deal. I'll just turn them off, right?
I need it. Why? I was okay. I was happy.
After some time of wondering, Simon realizes that he was not human as well. It was just an error of perception and illusion. It may sound silly, but in our life such a condition is called anosognosia. It is a condition in which a person with a disability is cognitively unaware of having it, due to an underlying physical condition. In other words, this unawareness is a psychological reaction. Taking this into account, I retrospectively realize that Simon ended several lives. So technically, Simon killed people in the body of robots. The perception of the situation changed. Further in the story, we meet an ordinary robot, which, fulfilling its function, helped us to get to several destination points.
Well, thanks, little guy.
A little further in the story, we need a chip, and you can remove it either from that very friendly robot or from a robot with human consciousness. The game again puts me in front of a choice, taking into account the existing knowledge. Will I repeat the action that I regretted a little earlier by killing a human mind in this robot, or will I sacrifice a complete machine that helped me and perhaps will help me in the future? So, I met the only living person in the whole game, but she's tired and asks to kill her. Will I be selfish and keep her alive in an effort to ease my feeling of loneliness, or will I respect such a desperate request?
You serious about me killing you?
No, love to hang around here until I dry up to the size of a raisin. Simon, this fucking sucks. I don't want to live like this.
And once again, there are no consequences of these decisions, but I was so immersed in the game that it was hard for me to make these decisions even after several walkthroughs. The game puts the player in rather difficult situations, and even if these situations do not affect anything, their very presence at times caused me discomfort. The feeling of life itself in the game is called into question. What is man? How little or how much needs to be replaced in the human body so that from the outside it ceases to be perceived as human? This refers us to the paradox of Theseus' ship. By replacing parts of a ship with identical materials, will the ship remain the same ship? After all, millions of cells are renewed in our body every second. In other words, every second we are, in a sense, new, but with the same consciousness. Is it possible to create an algorithm that can perceive the context? This refers us to the Turing test. Despite the fact that today mankind is mastering algorithms for structuring and presenting information, these algorithms still do not know how to understand context sufficiently. Maybe we'll talk about it in another video. In the end, Simon and Catherine transfer their consciousness to the Ark. Even the reaction of the ending will say a lot about you as a person. If your reaction was something like, well, what did you expect? It was shown several times that there is no such thing as a transfer of consciousness throughout the game. Then you are probably a very realistic and practical person. As for me, as a person brought up on happy endings, I hoped that some magic, some system error or something like this will happen, and Simon along with Catherine will manage to transfer themselves on the Ark. Although I kept this thought somewhere in the back of my head, it was such a slap in my face. I, just like Simon, hoped that somehow I'll be able to escape, that something will save me. As a result, he, having taken it out on Catherine, is forced to remain completely alone, in obscurity.
Yes! Fuck yeah! We made it! Woo! I'm still here. I'm still here. Catherine? Catherine?
I'm here.
What the hell happened? What went wrong?
Nothing. They're out there, among the stars. We're here.
No. We were getting on the Ark. I saw it. It finished loading just before it launched.
Yeah, I saw.
Then why are we still here?
Simon, I can't keep telling you how it works. You won't listen. You know why we're here. You were copied onto the Ark. You just didn't carry over. You lost the coin toss. We both did. Just like Simon at Omicron, just like the man who died in Toronto 100 years ago.
No, this is bullshit. We came all this way. We launched the Ark.
I know it sucks, but our copies are up there. Catherine and Simon are both safe on the Ark. Be happy for them.
Are you crazy? We're gonna die down here with those fuckers living at large on a spaceship. They're not us. They're not us.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Simon. I'm proud of what we did. We made sure that something of the hundreds of thousands of years of human history survives, that something lives on.
No. Fuck this. Fuck this. Fuck you. Fuck you, Catherine. You lied. And I believed in you. I trusted you. You said we're getting on the fucking Ark.
We are on the Ark, you idiot! I didn't lie. I can't be responsible for your goddamn ignorance. You
Fuck! Catherine? Please don't leave me alone. Catherine? Catherine?
It was this moment that scared me. Not the dozens of monsters I've seen in other games, not zombies, not ghosts, not lack of ammo. Looking at Simon, being literally and figuratively at the very bottom, I realized that I will die. This game reminded me that I am going to die, sooner or later. I'll be going through this alone, lost, probably scared. I have already faced the death of loved ones, and this is never an easy process. And even a long life can be a real punishment. This game made me plunge into a dying state and reminded me that even if there is a technology to transfer/copy consciousness, it will no longer be my ego, my mind. My I lives now in this particular body, and I will hardly be able to transfer it. My I is the one and only, and despite the fact that it may sound very life-affirming, the time of my I will come to an end sooner or later, and there's no way around it. Soma forces me as a player to plunge into a state in which I will constantly ask questions, very often uncomfortable questions. The game forces me to arbitrarily reflect on the answers I give to its questions. Soma is specific, real and clear, and it doesn't throw vague images at me while playing with my head. Yes, after playing Silent Hill, I can admire the symbolism. I can feel the fear of bizarre monsters, but in my head, there will still be a certainty, a knowledge that this is not for real. But Soma is different. Soma is a part of my head. It's a part of your head as well. And I'm not even touching technical aspects like sound design in this game. The game is great in terms of contemplation, and listening to it is insanely creepy. The dregs of the continental shelf, the intermittent darkness of the abyss, the clanks and creaks of the overloaded hull. Most of the key events in this story do not take place to influence the course of the plot, but to make you think about its main themes. Here, every diary, every memory has meaning and purpose. And even at the end of the game, we meet Simon and Catherine inside a simulation that looks pretty realistic to them, flirting with the themes that the Matrix and even some philosophies touched upon. What if we're now in the same arc that was created by someone else? What if the questions, where did it all come from, or what is the beginning of everything, is just a starting point for the start of the simulation? This game is full of philosophical reflections and implications. There is a reason when they say that a person is reflected in everything. For some, Soma is a boring adventure game with a predictable plot. The strangest thing is that these people will be absolutely right, but only from the point of view that they look at things, most likely very superficially. I saw more interesting and frightening themes in it. Someone who's much smarter than me will see even more subtle matters and hidden meanings in this game. Sometimes artworks begin to live separately from their authors and no longer owe their creators. And I am amazed that there is so much depth and there's so much to think about in such a small package. This is what I saw in this game. Tell me what you saw. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.